The Rip City Drive.
It was a bit like Geraldo and Al Capone's vault draft day. The Blazers came in, they drafted Scoot Henderson. No blockbuster, no big trade. Moving on, moving forward. Here to talk about all of it and what the Blazers do from here. Oregonian sports columnist Bill Oram back on the big show. Good morning, Bill. How are you?
Good, Justin. How's it going?
I always love dropping pop culture references and then getting the eyes from my 27-year-old producer looking at me like, what was Al Capone's vault and who is Geraldo?
I mean, I remember that as well, and I think that it is just funny when you think back on kind of those cultural moments when what passed as big news or what riveted us as a nation in the old days before we were all, I think, before we were all so online and all distracted by so many different things.
I want to dive into draft, introductory press conferences, Dame stuff, all of that. But we need to get down to an important thing, Bill. This was Scoot Henderson right after being drafted when asked what he wants to do. His first thing he wants to do in Portland. Here's what Scoot Henderson had to say about getting here to the Pacific Northwest.
Tell me what's the first thing you want to do when you get to Portland?
I want to go to the lake when the first thing I get to Portland. I'm going to see the fans. Once I'm free, I'm going to go to that lake.
All right, what lake are we talking about here, Bill?
Well, I like to think that he's thinking of Hebo Lake up on top of Mount Hebo on the coast near where I grew up. I won a couple of kids fishing contests as a child there. Always a chance to talk about Lake Oswego. We certainly know that a lot of Blazers end up around there. Probably a better chance he means the Willamette River, but that's okay, right? We can forgive a 19-year-old from Georgia, right?
Well,
for not totally understanding the water masses around bodies of water around Portland.
Oh no, it is 100% understandable. I likened it to like when I was a kid and we went to Arizona on a summer trip, and then we went to the Grand Canyon and realized that it is nowhere near Phoenix. And it's like, hey, I'm in Arizona. Yep. Let's go to the Grand Canyon. He's like, yeah, it's going to be a long trip. And so I was wondering if, like, he Googled Oregon and, like, hey, Crater Lake is a really cool thing, and not maybe realizing that's a good 5-hour drive just on a good day to get down to Crater. I thought he might have meant Crater Lake, not realizing exactly where it was in the state.
Yeah, I mean, listen, if it's lakes he likes, we have them, and they are plentiful. And as I noted with Lake Oswego, you don't even have to go that far. But the Great Lakes of Oregon, not a thing, are actually the Great Lakes of Oregon, but there are lakes that are great in Oregon, are not the ones you would consider to be in the Portland area. But if Scoot wants to get out and explore,
yeah. I
mean, listen, he can do something that his predecessor at point guard with the Portland Trailblazers never did, and he can go visit the Oregon coast. Which, of course, was the highlight of my year last year, learning that Damian had never been to my homelands.
Don't worry. I'm pretty sure he's never been to Douglas County either. So I think you and I both safe there. All right, let's dive into this, Bill, because like I mentioned before, it was a crazy month, right? From the ping pong balls to, is it Zion? Is it Brandon Ingram? Is it Paul George? A lot of names floating around. I was guilty as anybody else, kind of playing that imaginary matchmaker game. In the end, Joe Cronin took the pick at 3. Also said, don't want to trade Dame. Now that we kind of have it in hindsight looking back, it seems like this might have been the plan all along. Not that it was never a possibility, but it seemed as though that Joe Cronin was leaning towards picking kind of unless an absolute ridiculous trade offer came about. Is that the feel you got?
Well, yes, and not because of any decision Joe Cronin necessarily made early on in the process, but when it became clear that the Blazers were angling for a high pick and started losing games at the end of last year, I kind of started hitting some of my NBA sources about this draft. And they were all very clear that if you had a top 3 pick in this draft, you were not trading it.
Yeah.
You were not trading the opportunity to draft Brandon Ingram or Scoot Henderson. And I remember talking to some people at the time late in the season and saying, could the Blazers tank too well here, where they put themselves in a position where the ping pong balls, pop the right way and they end up in the top 3. And now you have to draft the pick. What does that mean for Damian? Well, that's what ended up happening, right? And so I don't know. I still remain unconvinced that there was a deal. I mean, I'm almost certain there was not a deal that would have made sense for the Blazers in terms of trading the number 3 pick. I mean, if you wanted to trade down and get, maybe you want to get some of Utah's pieces and then you trade down, or you want to trade down to Orlando, maybe there's something there that maybe works out in fairness-wise. But again, and people have been saying this over the last few days, you get so few opportunities to add, generational, transcendent, whatever term you want to use, but just franchise level talent when you're in Portland. It has only ever happened through the draft, and you typically get that with, high draft picks. And in this draft, and listen, there are going to be all-stars from all throughout this draft, different guys that we don't know are going to be all-stars that were picked in the 20s or, whatever. That's just the way it tends to go. But in this particular draft, having a top 3 pick, whether it was Victor at 1 or 2 or 3, you had a chance to really sort of reshape the trajectory of your franchise. And what I wrote after the draft was, this gave the Blazers options. For so long, they've only had the option of building around Damian because they were so backed into that corner. I don't even mean that like a bad thing. They just had invested so many resources. All their assets had kind of been lined up to be used toward Dame. But getting put in this position where they essentially had to draft a top 3 pick gave them, another way to go. And, they frankly needed that. So, I don't know if it was always Joe Cronin's plan. I think when they started losing games, if the pick had been 5, 6, 7, it would have been a lot easier to trade. I don't know that the return would have been all that impressive then either, but you would have at least been able to trade it, and maybe you could have brought somebody in. That said, with the number 3 pick, I think any deal you would have made would have ended up being symbolic and probably wouldn't have made you good enough.
Bill Oram, columnist for The Oregonian, joining us here on 620 Rip City Radio. Now, obviously, Scoot Henderson has not played a minute of NBA basketball, but, Bill, I would say kind of won the press conference on Saturday and really has a likability around him, and not better, not worse, just a little bit different than what we have seen. Shaedon Sharpe, very quiet, very soft-spoken. We didn't know anything about the guy. He played 5 minutes of summer league, and then he was out. We didn't know anything, like I said, anything really about him. Even Anthony Simons, when they drafted him, he's coming out of IMG Academy, and then now you got Scoot Henderson. Bill, he was not wearing a Blazer hat more than 5 minutes before he was essentially talking to Dame through ESPN, saying, yeah, get in the backcourt. We're going to be unstoppable. We're going to sell a ton of tickets. This is a kid that has some bravado, has got some guts, and again, to date myself, he's got the moxie. I know that doesn't equate to points, but it is something fascinating here to talk about in June.
Yeah, no, he is a really compelling personality. And, you pair that with what everybody says about the way he plays the game and how hard he plays and how hard he defends and the way he attacks the rim. I mean, he's going to be a lot of fun. Fans are going to really enjoy getting to know him. And you're right. The personality side of it, he's got kind of the whole, the $1 million smile. He's got the engages with people when he's answering questions, when he's talking to them. He's just, he has personality. And, I think that Portland, as much as that feels like everyone in Portland, and I think this is less true, by the way. I mean, you hear it kind of from both sides now on the trade Dame, don't trade Dame question. I think there are a lot of fans who are more okay with that than they thought they would have been 2 months ago. But if Damian Lillard does end up leaving Portland this summer, Scoot Henderson to me is the clearest, proof that there's life after Dame, right? I mean, fans are going to fall in love with this kid. He has, tons of, moxie, like you said. He's just really likable. And that's before he's even stepped on the court. And his game is probably the most likable thing about him when you think about, a guy who is just, goes, 100 miles an hour every minute, plays both ends of the court, gets to the rim, throws down thunderous dunks, likes to create for his teammates, is great in the pick and roll. He's going to be really fun once he's on the floor. And I think you're seeing fans already get kind of swept up in kind of everything else he brings too.
It is fascinating, Bill, because you do kind of have two sides of what's going on with the Blazers. You've got a guy in Scoot Henderson, and everybody that covers the draft, smart people who are like, yeah, the Blazers absolutely won this draft. They had Scoot Henderson. They got Chris Murray, Rupert. Everybody says that might have been the steal of the second round, and all the draft experts are like, the Blazers A+ knocked this draft out of the park. And then there is kind of this other side, which is, okay, what happens with with our superstar, so much so that Friday night, 26-year-old Will Smith song playing in the background kind of became a focal point of Blazer Twitter, which again, I love Big Willie style. I ran that CD through my car when I was 17, like everybody else did. But what is your kind of gut sense? And again, not even going to write it down in pencil, just kind of a gut sense in what happens with Dame moving forward now.
Yeah, I think the gut sense probably is that everybody moves on, or at least that's sort of the conventional wisdom side of it, where Damian looks at it and says, this team's getting really young. And the Blazers look at it and say, we're well positioned to move on, right? We have a young core of Shaden, Scoot, and Anthony, along with the other guys who've been drafted. I mean, you could go Jabari Walker and Chris Murray and Ryan Rupert. We can recoup other assets. This is kind of the time to sort of pivot. And I think that's probably what happens. That said, it would also, I hate to be too diplomatic on this, but we've just seen Damian Lillard, kind of surprise us on the loyalty front, over the years, where kind of when everybody expects him to sort of say, you know what, this is it, I'm done, to come back to the table and say, you know what, I'm actually in. And I think that this is going to be the time when he does pivot. But it would be very in character for him to say, you know what, I wanted to go one way, but also I can be sold on these young guys. I believe in these young guys, and I'm going to mentor them, and I'm going to get them up to the level that they need to be at, and we're going to win. We're going to win soon. That said, I just feel like that is not very realistic, at least in terms of winning at a high level on Damian's timeline. All things end, and I just think that that's kind of where this relationship has ended up, and I fear that if they don't come together and get to that place where they can amicably agree to get Damian someplace else, where he wants to be, where he is wanted, where the Blazers can get a healthy return for his services, and they can kind of part as friends. I do fear that there's a world where this could turn ugly, where if Damian wants out, or Damian says he wants to, realizes how young it is, and it just it kind of keeps in the spin cycle. I think if you're a Blazers fan, the one thing you really want to avoid is seeing this become a strained relationship at the end, and then still ending. I think if this is going to end, the Blazers and Damian Lillard, need to do everything in their part to keep it as amicable as possible. Because there is no one who has meant more to the Blazers in the last 40 plus years than Damian Lillard. And I only have the caveat for Bill Walton because of what he did to bring a championship here. In terms of connecting with the city, lifting the franchise. And Damian Lillard has been singular. And so the idea of that being a toxic connection in the end, I think would be more heartbreaking for fans than the simple act of him leaving.
Bill Oram, columnist from The Oregonian, joining us here on 620 Rip City Radio. And I think also the other fascinating part of this, and I'm curious your thoughts, because we have social media in our world now. Didn't have social media when Clyde Drexler was moved to Houston. I think a lot of Blazer fans were wondering, like, what the heck happened? Why is Clyde leaving? Well, if we'd had social media, we had a whole lot more sources, and now you've got a whole 5+ years of essentially receipts, if that's what the kids are still saying, of like Dame being, no, I'm the loyal guy. I'm the one that sticks. I don't wear 0. I wear the letter O. That one of those is Oregon. I'm the loyal guy. That's where it does get a little bit fascinating, because player movement is nothing new in the NBA. But Bill, Dame has clearly kind of positioned himself as the loyal guy. And I wonder how much of that is going to factor in, because Joe Cronin essentially said, no, we want Dame to stay. We would like him to retire a Blazer, almost kind of putting the ball in his court. Like, are you going to go back on all that loyalty stuff?
Yeah, it's been a hot potato, right? Yeah. Where, it feels like somebody has to almost be the adult in the room and say, what actually makes sense here. And I keep trying to think about what it actually looks like if Damian stays. And it just is hard to really understand how you can, kind of try to win now because you have a you have an all-time great in the prime of his career in Lillard, right? He's in the prime of his career, just had a career year scoring-wise. If you're building around him, you're trading first-round picks to get veteran talent. Maybe you're trading Anthony Simons to bring in, more immediate help. You're re-signing Jeremy Grant to whatever contract it takes to keep him here. And that just doesn't feel like good business for a team that, has a long runway with, Scoot and Shaden. It just doesn't really make sense to be on those two paths, because anything you do to serve the now is borrowing from the future. But then if you aren't making moves to be better now with Damian, then what is he doing here? So it just, that's why I say it feels like these sides are going to agree to move on, because it just doesn't seem like you can honor really either path right now. It would be a disservice to both paths. And so at that point, that's just not good for anybody. It's not good for, Scoot Henderson starting his career. It's not good for Damian Lillard still pursuing, team success. It's not good for Joe Cronin in terms of, credibly managing the organization. It's really not good for Chauncey Billups, who, would essentially have two jobs. So I just don't really see how you blend these things. As much as I think Damian Lillard and Scoot Henderson can play together, by the way, I think they can. And I think that they would really like each other. I think Dame and Scoot are cut from, the same cloth. And so that's the one thing that I keep coming back to is, man, maybe Scoot and Dame, maybe they could make it work. But then it's like, well, then what are you taking away from Scoot's future? What are you taking out of the cupboard for 5 years from now, trading a 2028 draft pick, whatever, that would, be here to sort of supplement the Scoot Henderson era to still sort of fulfill the Dame Lillard era. It's just really tricky.
One last thing before we let you go, Bill Oram from the Oregonian joining us here on 620 Rip City Radio. And it kind of goes to what you were just saying there. And regardless of whether if Dame stays or if he goes, we'll probably determine this. But Blazer fans have seen, like, Shaden Sharp got his, 10 to 15 minutes a night until the end. Before that, you had Terry Stotts. He did not like playing rookies at all. And now you're in a spot where you've got this guy who's he's not coming from college. He's coming from the G League, which is professional basketball. He's played there for 2 years. I know he's 19, Bill, but I got to imagine the Blazers, like you mentioned, want to play him and play him early and often. I don't get a sense that it's going to be a little bit like Shaden or with Anthony Simons, where they bring him along slowly. You get that sense?
Oh, I mean, he's going to play. Yeah. I mean, that is not even a question to me. I mean, he's played 2 years of professional basketball, and there was a question in the press conference on Saturday from my colleague Aaron Fentress, who essentially said, do you view Scoot differently from Shaden because he's been a pro? And Chauncey was, unequivocal that, Shaden, last time Shaden had played basketball before he got to the NBA was in high school, a year earlier, a full calendar year. And so, with Scoot, he's got a couple years of pro ball. He is mature. He's physically more ready than Shaden was. He's been playing against grown men. He's been leading grown men. I mean, I think it's a great little serendipity that Pooh Jeter, who played at the University of Portland and has been kind of making his way as a pro for the last 18 years, just got hired on with the Blazers G League team. He was a teammate of Scoot Henderson with the G League Ignite. He's 40 years old, and Scoot said, essentially he had no problem, telling Pooh what to do last year with the Ignite. So, I think Scoot Henderson is ready to come in and contribute, and he'll make mistakes, and there'll be a learning curve, and there'll be moments where he looks 19, but from a physical standpoint, from a kind of polished standpoint, he's going to look more ready than your typical rookie.
You can follow him on Twitter at Bill Oram. You can, of course, read his stuff in the Oregonian, OregonLive.com. Hey, Bill, thanks so much. Really appreciate the time. Have a terrific week. Summer vacation, so didn't have to drop off the kids today. So appreciate you hopping on the big show.
My pleasure, Justin. Thanks, man.
There you go, Bill Oram, boys and girls. I mean, it is interesting, the whole, I said it. This is why I didn't think the whole Dame Scoot thing, they were going to coexist. Would love to see them play together, but does that help the 2025 Blazers? Right? Which is kind of where I think Joe Cronin's eyeballs are. Scoot's going to play. Playing alongside Dame, how much does that help a rookie? Could it? It could massively help. Could also hold him back a little bit.